100,000 people checking us out. Give them a shout. We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022. Today we start 365 days of mobilization to change this nation. And because we are Moral Monday, because we are the Poor People's Campaign, and I greet you on behalf of also Reverend Dr. Leah Steele Harris. Check out the screen. Part of us, this is virtual, part of it is live, but first thing we always do is a roll call from the stage. And before the band goes off the stage, give them a big hand. Come on, give them a big scream. Miss Yara Allen, the Street Genie Freddie Green, and all of the accompaniment. Check out your screens.
In 2018, there were 140 million Americans who were poor or one emergency away from economic ruin.
Across the country, in communities and forgotten places, poor people and low-wage workers of different races, genders, abilities, sexualities, and faiths are building a moral fusion movement.
We are coming together across all the lines that divide us to restructure and lift our society from the bottom up.
We delivered our demands.
We demand.
We demand.
We demand.
We demand.
Reinvestment in and the expansion of public housing, ensuring that all have a decent house to live in and a place to call home.
We engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience.
To follow that breaking news in Albany, where a large group of protesters have moved back into the street.
Today's Poor People's Campaign rally, part of simultaneous rallies in more than 30 states and Washington, D.C.
Over the past 5 weeks, nearly 2,000 people have been arrested in what organizers describe as the most expansive wave of nonviolent direct action this century.
Our backs are against the wall, and we got no choice but to push.
Because it's crucial that we make ourselves heard.
For a country this rich to have so many people poor, it's immoral and it's wrong.
We testified on Capitol Hill.
Never before have impacted leaders gotten to march into Congress and present a budget.
We brought a full budget request and a movement behind it.
During the pandemic, we organized the largest social media gathering of the poor in U.S. history.
We mobilized, we organized, we registered, and we educated poor voters across the country.
And we helped bring poverty to the national agenda.
Something that hasn't come up very much tonight, but deserves a lot of attention, poverty. You know, the Poor People's Campaign is marching on Iowa right now, calling on us to talk about this issue more.
Ending poverty will not just be an aspiration. It will be a theory of change to build a new economy that includes everyone.
Our country now stands at a tipping point. We can realize a third Reconstruction to fully address poverty and low wages from the bottom up.
Today we say to poor people, Mr. Speaker, we see you and we will eradicate poverty in our country with you.
No democracy can claim to be strong when 140 million people, or 43% of its people, are poor and low wealth.
Now, we're organizing to realize a third Reconstruction. It's time to fully address poverty and low wages from the bottom up. We are fighting forward together
and not one step back.
I want you to know that when hands that once picked cotton join hands of Latinos, join hands of progressive whites, join faith hands and labor hands and Asian hands and Native American hands and poor hands and wealthy hands with a conscience and gay hands and straight hands and trans hands and Christian hands and Jewish hands and Muslim hands and Hindu hands and Buddhist hands. When we all get together, we are an instrument of redemption. When we join hands, we can revive and make sure that the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and equal protection under the law is never taken away from anybody. So I got a question. Are the rejected ready to revive and declare that this land is your land, this land is my land, this land is our land. And together, from the State House to the White House, the rejected are going to demand that this nation never give up on being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to everyone here in Halifax Hall, here in Raleigh. Welcome to all the people joining online, across the country, across the world, to this powerful uprising. This mass poor peoples and low-wage workers assembly, where we're launching 365 days of fighting forward. Forward together, not one step back. We are here because people, poor people, low-wage workers, unpaid care workers, sub-minimum wage workers, homeless families, welfare rights leaders, healthcare workers who can't even afford healthcare. Because family farmers, teachers, veterans, folks that have lost so much in COVID, and to the pandemics of racism and poverty that preceded. All kinds of beautiful, powerful people are rising up. We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, the 140 million poor and low-income people in this, the richest country in the world, have. The power that we have to reconstruct society from the bottom up. And we're here to commit to fighting forward for these 365 days. And until everyone is fed, until everyone has decent housing, until everyone is paid living wages and are able to enjoy the fruits of our labor, until Black lives matter, Indigenous lives matter, until we can end countless wars, until we ensure clean water and clean land and clean air for absolutely everyone. Yes. We are committed to fighting forward for a moral march on Washington. We know that when forces of regression, forces that want to deny people the right to vote, forces that blame the poor for poverty rather than a poverty-producing system, forces that pay lip service to addressing injustice but refuse to raise wages or expand health care, or who decide to compromise with people's lives and the infrastructure of our communities. When such forces of regression sow violence and inequality and division, moral movements led by those most directly impacted by injustice, banding together with people from all walks of life, these movements arise. They build a better world. They make a difference. And I'm here to let you know that we are making a difference. Yeah. People are organizing in more than 45 states across this country. Hundreds of partner organizations are joining forces together. Thousands of faith leaders from dozens of different faith traditions are making a clarion call for justice. This movement is putting pressure, it's persisting, and because of this, poverty is on the national agenda for the first time in over a generation. Because poor people and moral leaders and clergy and activists and organizers and advocates are mobilizing and organizing and educating and registering people for a movement that votes. A fusion movement is growing. It's gaining strength. And we're here. And we're organized. Congressional leaders have introduced a resolution in the House of Representatives calling for a third Reconstruction, fully addressing poverty and low wages from the bottom up. Inspired by this Poor People's Campaign. Inspired by the commitment and the clarity and the capacity and the connection of poor and low wealth people leading this movement. Committed to building and deepening the resolve this nation needs to become a more perfect union. This movement is made up of moms whose water has been turned off, whose children are being taken away, who cry out, "Take away our poverty, not our children." This movement is made of families who have lost children to the lack of health care, who have wailed that their children are no more, but are committed to fighting until all have the right to live. It's made up of grandparents in Cancer Alley, Louisiana, family farmers in Kansas, border communities in Texas, police brutality activists in St. Louis who are crying out, everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail because everybody's got a right to live. Poverty will not always be with us. Racism and violence and division is not inevitable. We can save the earth. We can end the militarization of our communities and the world. We can reject the false narratives of Christian nationalism, of white supremacy. Because this movement, this Poor People's Campaign, is moving forward together, not one step back. Forward